Okay, we live. Okay, so sorry, y'all. So sorry for the delay. Had to make sure that we were streaming from the right account, but we are good to go now. And so, welcome to another installment of Mumbo Jumbo Community Conversations. My name is Chinyelu. I will
Trying to
be our
get my hot cup of
conversation.
tea started
I will be our conversation
so
facilitator
I
tonight.
can have my
As
hot cup of lemon
oh,
zinger Pombana just gave me
Mrs. Fair, can you
to
hear
enjoy
us?
the discussion.
Can y'all hear us?
There we go. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. One second. No problem. Yes, sir. Come sit down. Okay, y'all can hear us? Great, great, great. Okay, I'm going to try this one more time. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another installment of Mumbo Jumbo Community Conversations. My name is Chinyelu. I will be our conversation facilitator tonight as we enter our last discussion, or at the very least, our last discussion for now, of Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower. Yeah, this has been without a doubt, one of my favorite book discussions we've had here in a while. So definitely thank everybody for, joining us and participating over the last few weeks. Whether this is your first time, whether you're a returning customer, especially everybody who's been here multiple sessions. Yeah, this is gonna let's make this last one as good as all the others. But okay, as you know, of course, first we got to get started with our check-in. For anybody who is new to the space or who may be, watching the live stream, who's maybe not familiar with the Kepler Institute and how we like to do things around here. The check-in is just something that we do to make sure that we're maintaining, an awareness of each other, that we're prioritizing, where everybody's at, prioritizing relationships and just like maintaining an awareness of what everybody needs in the space. So, typically, what that looks like is everybody will go around the room and they'll give a number and a color that are both supposed to kind of represent, how they're feeling in that moment. And then there'll be sort of like an icebreaker question as well. So, let's maybe do, typically, I like to do a question that's related to the topic of the day. As we know, we're talking about Parable of the Sower. It's a book all about change. So maybe let's say, what's uh, um, what's uh, what's something in your life that has changed recently? Yeah, what's something in your life that's changed recently? Would anybody like to take it first? Also, you can take this mic, Charles. Oh, I'll kick it off. Let me see. I think I'm feeling like I've been saying chalkboard green today. And something that's changed in my life recently. Ooh, something that I can share. Let me think. Um, I think I've been spending a lot more time with my younger siblings lately. That's been a change, and it's been a good change. There've just been some circumstances in life and in the family that have brought us a little bit closer together. So, my little sister came and hung out at the house yesterday, and I saw her again today. And yeah, yeah, been talking on the phone and stuff. So, definitely feels good. And I'll pass it to Charles.
So I am a 9.8.
Can't hear you. No,
Is
we
it
can't
is
hear
it
you.
on? Let me see. Oh, it looks like it's on. Okay, here you go, Charles. That one.
All right, thanks. Well, I'm a 9.8, very, very faint blue, um, because biking down here from north of here, I fought a terrific south wind, terrific headwind, and it just reminded me of how substantial oxygen and air molecules are. Something that has changed in my life is that over the past month or two, I have changed in my awareness of people's sensitivity to language. I am adamantly anti-politically correct, but that only goes so far, and at some point you have to admit that political correctness does have a place. Yeah, okay. All right.
Let's go with Miss Betty.
I am a 10 and my color is bright orange. And the change is all of a sudden I'm wanting to travel again. And I'm actually making some travel plans. During the pandemic, I did not want to travel, didn't think about traveling. So that's kind of a big change for me. And I'm kind of excited about it. And I can pass that on to Cass.
Hey y'all. Feel like a 22 golden yellow today. And let's see. Um, Something has changed for me is I guess how creative I've been feeling. I noticed that as soon as that weather broke, I don't know, I just kind of got out of the winter blues, out of the hibernation stage, and now I'm thinking about different things that I can do in my different projects. And let's see, I will pass it to Tara.
Hey y'all, good evening. I'm feeling like I like the color of this blue that I'm looking at. I can't really describe it, but blue. Um, I'll say 450. And so many things have changed. I feel like I'm always changing, but I guess the one example that I'll share, starting last year, like more like the end of last year, I started taking more consistent walks, um, partially inspired by Alvin. But like now I can like feel it. Like if I can just get in like a 20-minute walk a day, then I'm good. And I'll pass it to PB, Pambana.
Hi, everybody. Sunlight, White, Infinity, and the most recent changes. My granddaughter will be 8 months and 2 days. And so I wanted to like start spending quality time with her like I do with my grandson who's 3. So she came over today, but she only wanted to stay like about 30 minutes. She was like, after that, where's my mama? So she went back home. But hopefully over time, as she gets a little bit older, we'll be spending more time together. So that's the change for me. And I will pass it to Crystal.
Sorry, I couldn't get off mute for a second. So I am actually going to go with my favorite number, which is number 5. It's not an indication of kind of where my mood is, but it's just always my go-to number and my favorite number. In terms of color, I probably would say kind of gray. Again, not an indication of my mood. It's just kind of like what the weather is looking like here. And I actually like that color, and it's raining. So, like one of my favorite weather events. Um, I am in Wauwatosa, Wisconsin. And something that's changed for me recently is just kind of navigating through the loss of all of my elders. Um, so that's kind of like been interesting and kind of, you know, a weird kind of place to be in. And I will pass it to, let me see, Tara.
You
Did
with
you
us,
say Tara?
Tara? Oh, there you are.
Did you say Tara?
Yes.
I already
Yes.
went. I can
Let me
go
see.
again.
Have we heard from Lena?
Hey there. I haven't spoken yet. My name is Lena. This is my second time in the group. I joined earlier this week for Dr. Lawana's talk. I would say a number for me is probably a 1.3, and a color is like a deep, deep yellow, kind of like the sun sometimes when it rises, almost so orange, deep yellow, orange. And something new for me is not a caregiver anymore, which is really, really odd. I was taking care of 3 generations. And yeah, I'm not a caregiver anymore. So I adopted over 50 plants and I'm growing 200 seedlings right now. So it's really taking over, but it's therapeutic for me. And that's how I'm dealing with it. And
Wow.
I'm in public right now, so I may not be able to chime in, but I am listening the entire time. Thank y'all for hosting this.
Thank you very much for joining us. Let's see. I think that might be everybody on the Zoom. Remind me your name one more time. Bill. All right, I'm going to pass it to you, Bill.
What was the third question?
Something that's changed in your life recently.
I'll say my number is a 7. No particular reason. My color will be magenta. Again, just what kind of popped in my head. And something changed recently. I don't know. I'm a teacher, so I think a lot of times every day is kind of a change. You never know what's going to happen with those kids, so you kind of roll with things as the day progresses, and never turns out the way you think it's going to. So every day is kind of change.
Thank you, everyone. I'm Charlotte. Number is 3. Color is gray. Just looking at the sky all day has been kind of gray, but I like it again, similar to what Crystal said. And color fuchsia. I saw some of the change is that crocuses have died in our yard, but little buds are coming out, other buds, and they're like fuchsia in color. So, you know, what dies will be replaced.
All righty. Let me see. Have we heard from Mrs. Fair? Yeah. You're muted, Mrs. Fair.
Okay, I arrived early. I am unmuted now. Okay. I arrived early and then I went to make myself some wonderful lemon zinger tea. I've never had lemon zinger before that Pambana shared with me. And I'm a yellow 10 because no matter how gray, we know that sun is up there waiting to bust through the clouds as soon as it finds a thin place. The rays of light will come right through. In fact, if I remember correctly, it was the sun came through just a little bit earlier today. And I'm a 10 just because I can use every single limb hanging off of my body. All my appendages work, so I'm good. And the big change for me is the unbelievable as the I'm 82. So in 60, I was in my 20s in in college. Hadn't quite graduated yet. And the big changes that happened in civil rights era and the feminist movement and the Black Power movement, those were big changes. And here I am again. Betty, you will understand this in big changes once again. I mean, big, big. I thought that the Black Power movement was big. The Elon Musk movement is even bigger, more deadly, and affects many more people. So that's my big change. I know we've all looked at it, but it's unbelievable.
Yeah. Let me see. Have we heard from did we hear from Cass? Did you go already, Cass?
Yeah, I went already.
Okay, cool. Nas, you want to check in? Alrighty, Nas is gonna come up and check in. Be our last.
Thank you. Nas here, feeling like 9.5 purple, my usual. Y'all know me. And a big change recently. Honestly, working here, being in this environment, especially with this young man facilitating today, Chinyelu, um, that's been my big change. Thank you to all the Kepler folk and Kepler members that have made this possible for me.
And thank you, man. Good working with you as well. Alrighty. Well, fantastic. So we will go ahead and get started for tonight. And of course, we may have more folks join us here in the room or on the Zoom call. And if we do so, we'll just wait for the natural pauses in the conversation to let them check in as well. Camera, turn over here. Oh well, technology. There it is. But yeah, let's go ahead and get started today. So, this will be as we've already established. This will be our last discussion. We'll be finishing up the book today. We'll be going through chapters 19 through 25. So just a little bit of a recap. Last discussion, we ended off on chapter 18. I do. Do you know how to use it? Okay, yeah, you do your thing because it's working for me. Yeah. So, chapter 18, they made their way to Santa Barbara. They talked Travis and Natividad and their family learned more about Earthseed, and the Earthseed community is kind of starting to take shape. Folks are starting to you know feel this ideology a little bit. And then we move on into chapter 19. So, chapter 19 opens up with an earthquake that shakes the ground where they're walking briefly, but eventually moves on. That said, though, there is some destruction around them, so a little bit of chaos, and in that, people get knocked over, get stolen from a little bit, some buildings get knocked down. They meet Bankole, who's an older guy pushing a cart, walking in the same direction that they're walking. And he helps them save Allie and Jill Gilchrist, who they find buried under some rubble. They fish them out. And even though there's a little bit of tension there because Jill, who I think is the older sister, is like, "Are you guys a cult? What's going on here?" When Lauren makes it clear that we're not going to force you guys to believe what we believe to travel with us. They agree to travel. They reach Salinas, and they end up loading up on gear. So that's chapter 19. It's a quick one. Anybody have any reflections from chapter 19 that they wanted to point out? Yeah.
For me, it was that store that had all that stuff in it, but there were security guards everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the police will be paid to
Mm-hmm.
protect property and not to help people.
That's a really good point because we definitely see that a lot. This idea that don't worry about it, Nas. This idea that now that the society has kind of collapsed, the cops really just like, that's exactly what you said. They're there to keep people from stealing stuff, but not really much else.
And
I
it's
think
not so much, I know they're taking things without paying for it, but it's not so much
mhm.
stealing stuff, but the general society does not have human services
Yeah,
so that people don't have to steal.
yeah.
And just like the young men had been working in order to have some place to stay. And so the anything they bought, a piece of it generally would go back to whoever was in charge of letting the store
Hmm.
owner even have a place to be, as in taxes. And there just was not the, I'll call it social services system to keep people looking at how do we make our community strong, not I'm desperate. I gotta go take this stuff from these other people, stuff that I just abscond with. So I
Mm-hmm.
think of it, not as um, maybe the security people are there to say, "Hey, you don't have to take food. Go around to the back. We have a pantry, and we have people who cook
Yeah.
for those who don't have." Just the human part of a society that makes where you stay not mean. It's hard to live in a mean society.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll also say it's definitely pretty bleak and familiar that even though, the society can't afford to take care of people, house people, feed people at an affordable cost, it can still afford to keep products on the shelves and hire security guards, So I think it speaks a lot to the priorities there. Yeah. Yeah. Anything else on chapter 9? Yeah.
That was part of what kept getting me, that they could keep spending money and that money was still valued and that the capitalism was still thick there. Like you could still get what you needed as long as you had cash, or you could find a place to hopefully work and trade your services. But I think it was about here where I started seeing that over and over, like, oh, wait, money is still power, not community, which is what they need, right? So
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point because on the one hand, yes. But on the other hand, I think or I guess what I'll say is I think the way that I see it is more like money is still a type of power, but it's a type of power that is becoming harder to access for everyday people. And so I think you see sort of because they are getting along together, but there's no monetary exchange between them, they're giving the people that they bring into their group, they feed for free, exactly, so it's there is still, I think if anything, it's the there's the power of money is decreased as we see with the inflation, the idea that a few $100 isn't a lot in this world, so it's the money is less powerful, which gives other forms of power space to rise up, as people have to figure out other ways to feed themselves and take care of themselves, but it's definitely still a factor. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
sorry, I was just surprised that it was still so prevalent that not everybody had figured out, like, we just need to take care of each other. It was just the surviving groups, small groups maybe. But
Yeah. It's like a transitionary state. Yeah. Anything else on chapter 19? Yeah, all of these points will come back up a little bit later as well. Those pieces about, the police, those pieces about oh, I see Crystal came off mute.
Yeah, I think that like for me, it's kind of like it's like the beginnings of the early influence of her taking Earthseed out of her head and putting it out
Mm,
in the realm of possibility and reality, particularly when meeting Travis and Navidad. So
yeah,
and then it's kind of like the beginnings of her trying to form or create a community, not just surviving. And then the other thing that was interesting to me is like there's a shift there, and it's the kind of the novel itself shifts from individual survival to more of a group survival and shared beliefs, kind of
yeah.
hinting at the birth of Acorn.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really astute observation. That especially the idea of that shift. Because I also think it's as their group gets bigger, the challenges they face navigating the world change,
Mm-hmm.
they no longer have to worry about dealing with smaller groups of scavengers, but these larger conflicts get a little bit more difficult because you got more people to take care of. um yeah, I see a hand from Tara. Oh, and then I'll pass it to you, Bill.
Yeah, yeah, I just had to grab my book to make sure this is the right part because on that last part that you said, Chin, and then also inspired from what Crystal just said, like what stood out to me from this chapter was when they were like, there was an opportunity to get this like rifle, but it like cost a lot of money. So then they had to like come together to be like, okay, so like if we get this, then we could potentially lose this or whatever, but we can gain this.
Mm,
So just this like collective community decision making and stuff with the resources that they have, and then just like evaluating like the pros and the cons of their
yeah.
situation. I mean, and they had like a really intense dialogue. Like when I was reading it, I was like, dang, that's a good point. Dang, that's also a good point. So and even with like Ben Cole, like using his skills to kind of like haggle down the price a little bit and stuff. So just like everybody kind of playing their different roles
Mm-hmm.
in the decision making, and then just like making collective decisions that benefit like the entirety and the longevity of the community that's forming.
Yeah. What were you gonna say, Bill?
Um, I was just going to comment on, I think the shift from the individual survival to the group survival. I was kind of thinking too, at least to me, it seemed like a parallel with, like when you think of empathy, usually you're thinking about an emotional empathy, so be able to relate to someone else's state of mind and emotion and like empathize. And she has a really acute physical empathy because of her condition, but I didn't feel like she had a good emotional empathy in the beginning of the book at all. Like when her brother was killed, I remember the quote was something like, "I don't feel any need to cry for my brother," and she had like couldn't connect with their stepmom, or yeah, stepmom, right? Um, but I think that it changes on the road where she does see people and starts developing more emotional empathy for people, and then starts seeing the group dynamic is only possible with that kind of empathy and kind of connecting everything. So I thought, I don't know, just some things I thought about.
Yeah, I think definitely along those lines. I think what that almost is like her sort of like applying this philosophy a little bit more. I think also in line with like with what Crystal said of like bringing Earthseed out of her head and into the world. I think that like a lot of it is her sort of like, like when she's around, like it's almost like when she's in her neighborhood, there's a lot of like questions about like where am I going? What am I gonna do? When am I gonna do it? Right now, it's a very clear like we just got to make it to where we're going to where we're going to. So I think if anything, it makes it like clear to me. It's like maybe it's clearer for her like these are the connections that I need right now. Like this is what it's gonna take to get us to that next place. So yeah, yeah. But let's bounce. Let's move forward. Let's move to chapter 20. This one's a little bit longer. It starts off with basically they're like we were gonna have a rest day and we decided not to. There's fires gaining on them. There's gunfighting close behind them. Lauren gets on the radio and learns that they basically just have to change their plans a little bit. And they had been planning ahead for the Bay Area. I think she said San Francisco across the Golden Gate Bridge. Turns out that the earthquake sent San Francisco into chaos. And now it's like, it's some parts are controlled by the police, some parts are controlled by gangs. And I think she said something along the lines of it's going to be a great place to avoid for a while. So they reroute to go around San Francisco. They end up getting caught up near another gunfight that's just happening a lot to them at this point in the journey, and they end up taking on another member. This time it's a little boy whose mother was unfortunately killed in the violence. And his name is Justin, and he immediately starts taking a liking to Allie, one of the sisters that they fished out of the rubble in chapter 19. Lauren and Bancole start to get a little close. They share a kiss, and that's all for now. We learn a little bit more about Allie and Jill and where they came from. You know, basically their father was their pimp. Allie, the younger of the sisters, had a baby whom their father killed, so they burned their house down and escaped. Yeah, they got out of there, and that's how they ended up on the road. So, and at this point, Lauren and Jill, who had been that kind of like the more resistant one, kind of like come together a little bit. They start like kind of like you said, like she's she's like taking more time to like get to know people and disarm them a little bit and just like sort of bring them in slowly. And then they pass through Hollister. And this is significant because Lauren mentions it as a town basically where people aren't, killing and stealing from each other. They haven't devolved into like animalism, I think is what she says. They're helping each other as neighbors. And she was like, imagine that. So I just thought that was interesting, especially just because, like, to what you had said, remind me your name one more time. Charlotte, yes, to what you had said, Charlotte, it's like there are definitely still places where like the capitalism is still like deeply entrenched, the transactionalism and like the dog eat dog is still deeply entrenched. But I think it was also Octavia Butler saying, but like just as this group is doing, there will be other places where people try to go a different way, so they didn't touch on that for too long, but they did mention it for a second. So, yeah, any thoughts on chapter 20? Any thoughts on chapter 20? Yeah, I was good. Charlotte said a romance. Yeah, I definitely remember that was the most shocking part about this chapter when I started reading it as well. You want to share more about that?
I just didn't see it coming, based on the description of him, but then I'm like, oh, maybe it makes sense. So, um, yeah, it was just a surprise to me. And then I can't, was it here that she realized her quote unquote disability would also make her feel extreme pleasure as pain? Or is that later? From earlier, but with him especially. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, no. I don't remember if it's like when they first met him or if it's like if it's in this chapter, like when they like first kissed, but um to me, it wasn't as surprising only because like there's a point where like Octavia basically is like, well, basically we're like Lauren's like he's a handsome man, older guy, and then she's like, and he reminds me of my dad, which is yeah, it's a thing. It's very much a thing. I think it's like, and I think it's especially because like obviously her and her dad were very close. He disappeared very suddenly. And so like it is not a stretch to me, especially after being through everything that she's been through, that like this is the type of man that she would develop an attraction for. So yeah, their dynamic is interesting to say the least, but we'll definitely get more into that shortly. What else from chapter 20?
For me, I don't know, it's just the stories just kept getting grislier and grislier for me.
Mm,
It was like I don't know if she's just trying to usher us in, at first, but I've read her books before, so I kind of figured that like the shock and the all the like I already knew that things were going to happen, um but some of their stories were just shocking, especially the one with the dad pipping out the daughters and stuff like that, like
mm,
and hearing about how like they'll find like younger girls who appear to be raped on the side of the road. Like it was just, I don't know, it was just like the stories just kept like getting grislier, and I was just like it. Um, and I do see some of this in the time we are now. A lot of us are just being desensitized by certain stories because it's like we keep hearing about certain stories to the point where when we hear about something that that is awful, like um I don't know, like this country bombed this country. I just feel like it kind of just we hear it, we kind of we kind of process it, but it's just kind of like you know, and I feel like
yeah.
that's one of the things that I kind of see from the book that is happening now. It's just like there's so much that's going on in the world that we're just becoming desensitized uh um to a lot of it as well, and we're just moving on. We're not even processing it.
Just gotta keep on pushing. Yeah. Were you gonna
Yeah,
say something, Mama Pambana? Yeah.
yeah, I guess for me, I felt like what Octavia Butler was trying to share is, you know, whether it's the best times or the worst times, as human beings, there are certain things that we need or that brings
Mm,
us together. So, as human beings, and if we're social, we always want, I think, somebody to bond with or someone that we think cares about us and that kind of thing. So,
yeah.
like the two sisters represented that. And typically, unless we've kind of lost all of our humanity to some degree, which there are groups that did that, children always usually bring out that more protective aspect of us. And so she was recognizing that, like with Justin and like with
Yeah.
Dominique, and how it impacted the group. But I don't find it strange that she was attracted to an older man because she's 18, but she's really an old soul, I would say, in the context. And it's kind of interesting because she's the youngest person
Yeah.
in the group, but her way of thinking is not tied to always because she's so young, but also she seems to be pretty mature and thinking about forward thinking and what could happen and what do we need to do to protect ourselves and those kind of things. So it makes sense to me that she would be attracted to an older man, even though
Yeah.
her previous boyfriend was about her age, that kind of thing. But I didn't find that strange because a lot of times they say that it takes guys a while to catch up to us. So
Yeah,
so
no.
I guess that's what I'm gonna say. But I was really looking at, but the other thing that I reflected on is that this group of people that she's dealing with, or I guess you would say, and you could say that her mom and dad were like middle class. So it's middle class and lower class. And then as they're out on the road, like they come across more people, I think, who have been somewhat lower class. So like, Travis and them were, I guess you could say, domestic workers. And then Jill and them and the relationship they had with their father. So it's kind of like, to me, showing or trying to show the different things that people have to live through, whether we're aware of them or not. And like Cassandra said, like, you know, uh slavery, prostitution still exists today, even though I won't say most of it, I can't say that, but I know I've never had to deal with. I don't even know anybody who has, but I know it exists, in the context of women, and I don't know about men being enslaved as prostitutes and things like that, and how they treat migrant workers, and like, overworking them, paying them little because they know they can't go to the police and things like that. So I think she was just trying to help us remember that, there's a lot of, I guess I would say, lesser and obstacles that people have to deal with. But even in the context of that, like in their guarded, that they still have not lost their humanity. So it always begs the question of, you know, circumstances do not dictate whether or not you're going to be a person that is, I guess I would say, caring or responsible, or one who is a predator. And so it's always interesting, I think, to look at that. And she does that with her group, and counter that with other experiences that they have.
Yeah. Yeah, I think oh yeah, one of the things that you said about specifically on like Lauren and Bankole is like, yeah, Lauren's definitely been through a lot. And they go into it a little bit deeper later, but they even got some really similar experiences. So yeah, I think that's another way it's like, and I think it's also that thing of like, it's shocking to us on the outside because we come from like a specific social and political context, but when you think about it in the context of their world, there were some very strange relationships even in her community growing up, like so comparatively, yeah, this isn't all that abnormal, at least not in the context. So, yeah, but we'll definitely talk about that a little bit more. Um, yeah. Yeah, thank you, Mama Pambana. I see you, Crystal.
So I think kind of like everyone else that the introduction of Bankole is really important. And it kind of offers like some of the first glimmer of hope against that backdrop of all that violence and those negative things that are going on. And he also introduces the element that I don't think that she had necessarily thought of or thought that she would encounter in him being a medical doctor, which is something that we'll eventually need. but also he has land, and so
Yeah.
it takes her from no longer from just kind of talking about a future to the ability to be able to plan for it based on him having land. And Bankoli's character or his presence introduces stability that wasn't there before. And his land kind
Mhm.
of provides that first real vision of a future beyond the endless travel and danger that they're currently in.
Yeah. It sort of gives them like a destination in a very like real way.
Hmm.
And like more to like Mama, what Mama Pambana was speaking about as well, just with like the people at like different levels of like, like status or like wealth in society. I think it's like, it's also very, it's very interesting to see like, even though none of them are in a good situation, there are little advantages, like the fact that like, yeah, Ben Cole's home also got burned down just like Lauren's, but because he comes from a wealthier background in the good times, he's got somewhere to go, versus like uh uh Allie and Jill, who are just like, drifting, trying to find what they can. So, but yeah, and this piece about the land is very, very important in the coming chapters as well. But yeah, anything else on chapter 20? Yeah, okay. We're moving. We've already jumped ahead a little bit, but that's okay. Well, let's move forward to chapter 21. This one starts off with a pretty interesting quote from the books of the living. The self must create its own reasons for being. To shape God, shape self. So definitely want to talk about that one in a second. But back to the plot. They ended up camping out for a bit near the San Luis Reservoir. Lauren had expected it to be dry, but there's still some water in it, and so there's sort of like a makeshift community that's kind of like come up around it. A lot of people with tents and settlements, and various shanties and such, and gardens growing all around. And even though like they are not welcoming to the group, they don't like repulse them either. But it's also very clear that it's like, hey, if you try to mess with what we got going on here, you're gonna have some trouble, But it does give them a place that they can camp out and relax for a little bit. They're there for a few days, just kicking their feet up while they can. Here's where we learn a little bit more about Ben Cole and about some of the things that we just talked about. Ben Cole learns that Lauren is 18, and I think it's interesting because like technically he comes from a time that's closer to the time that we live in now, like the social standards and stuff that we see now. And so I think that it's funny because he reacts the way that most of us kind of reacted, especially when she was like, "Oh yeah, I was born in 2009," like, whoa, Um, eventually they do kind of come to that place where it's just like, well, you know, um, this is where we are and this is what we want. And, there's really no reason for us not to go for that, And so, this part is also interesting. Um, oh, and actually, this is going into the okay, so yeah, I'll bundle no, actually, I won't do that yet. I won't bring up the conversation that Lauren and Ben Cole have about the land yet. That's in the next chapter. But yeah, they relax around the reservoir for a bit longer. Lauren starts teaching Zara how to read. Allie and Jill seem a little bit interested in learning as well. And yeah, that's basically chapter 21. Um, so yeah, what do we think about the San Luis Reservoir? What do we think about the idea that the self creates its own reasons for being to shape God, shape self? Um, yeah, any more reflections on Lauren and Bankole while we're here?
I think I have one because okay, so when they first kind of uh, began, like I was a little shocked about it.
Mm-hmm.
Um But then after a while, I was just kind of like, well, actually, it is kind of like I would say a smart match, I guess. When I guess like realizing that he has, he has resources and also him willing to I mean, I don't know, just him seem like a decent human being because I mean, it's not like I'm not gonna lie, it's not like she has like a lot of options, you know? Um, she just, I guess she just kind of was like, you know what? Um, I had this idea, I'm traveling, this person, the more I'm getting to know this person, the more, I'm getting to like this person, this person isn't, um, money hungry or, or you're weird or, just, he's not, out here doing like, crazy things, he's not addicted to anything. He's actually a doctor. He knows, I think he knows things. He's intelligent, stuff like that. And it's like how many of
Cassandra,
these
I'm
people?
thinking that they were like two people who could build a relationship and talk to each other and enjoy each other.
Yes,
And
like
when
it
he
was
found
just
out she was only 18, he was amazed that somebody that young could be such a great conversationalist and partner. Women are much more mature than men. And I think that and she felt like she knew how old he was. He didn't know how old she was. And so
mm-hmm,
she felt like, hey, this could be a friendship. This could be a friendship. And so because she could have said in the beginning, hey old man, I am, a baby. But I think he was more her speed than any of the other people that they ran into, any of the other male people. And I'm sure, I mean, it's like a grain of
yeah,
sand
like
on the
he was
beach.
on
And they
her
say,
level.
if you want to find a diamond, don't go looking on the beach. Go to a diamond mine. Well, since most of us don't have access to a diamond mine to go and find a diamond, you're in
mm-hmm,
this life, and as you have friendships with people, then you continue those friendships. Because remember, that they were a long way down the line before they decided to have a sexual relationship. They had been together for a while. Them talking together, and they were under real crisis situations that they had come through together.
mm-hmm,
People were trying to rob them. So, when you see how people act in crisis situations, and they act like you would have acted, so that you all can see that, gosh, we can face challenges together. You don't think opposite the way I do. And even if you do,
mm-hmm.
we can talk about it. So I, I just felt like Olivia, Octavia rather, that Octavia Butler was really about people. She had had a lot of different kinds of relationships, as,
Mm-hmm.
and so she could feel the character of his character and her character would be a great blend. And so it just seemed natural to me because that's what it is. You meet people along the way, and I don't want to. Old people would say you look talking about being old, but old people would say you size them up to see if they fit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that girl is smart.
Real
Yeah,
quick,
I
I
feel
do
like
see
they
that.
fit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
not just intelligent, but she's smart.
Yeah. And I also think it's like clearly, and well, we'll get to this a little bit later as well, but I see that Essence just joined us. Essence, thank you for coming out tonight. We love to have you check in, number and color, and what's a change that's happened in your life recently.
Hi everyone. I am an 8 today. My color is a mocha. And I don't think I've had any recent changes. That might be the problem. um, I can't really think of any recent changes. I think I've been, well, I guess I don't know if that's a change. I guess I'll say I am doing a little bit more in my personal businesses.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. Wonderful. Well, yeah, thank you for joining us. We were just on discussing chapter 21. Um, yeah, what about this idea? What about this verse? The self must create its own reasons for being. To shape God, shape self. How do people interpret that?
Yes, I'll answer it because I'm reflecting on it and I'm like, it's kind of interesting to reflect on that thing about to shape God, shape self. And I tend to view it as the incomprehensible, unknowable that encompasses everything. So I ain't doing nothing new. But I
Mm,
mean, maybe her perspective is just as true. In fact, that's one of the things I struggle with. I feel like, there's no one specific, I guess I would say, truth. And that truth is dependent on the experience, the perspective, and the reality of the person. So for her, I think that's definitely true because that's how she experiences God. And they get to talk about that earlier where she's like, this is who I am and this is real for me. And so I think in that sense, I
It's
accept
chilly
that
out there.
that's
You don't
real
feel
for
it's
her and that's
chilly
how she
out today?
sees it. It may not be how I experience it or how others experience it, but I also want to say that I appreciate that she says to people, hey, you know, you don't have to accept none of this. As long as you're willing to watch my back, and protect the community and make a contribution, it's all good. So that's what I'll
yeah,
say. But that's her perspective is definitely not my perspective, but that doesn't make it any less true.
yeah. I think the piece that you said about them not placing strict rules on belief, I think I really like that part. Um, when like when they met Allie and Jill, when Allie is like basically she's like, you guys are a cult, and Lauren's like, you can believe what you want to believe, man, but if you're down to move with us, you can move with us. So yeah, yeah. Miss Betty, were you gonna say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, to me, it kind of means that you shape your own future and your own life. You create
Mm,
your happiness or your sadness or where you're going and what you're doing. So that's kind of how I interpret that.
yeah, yeah. It's like she's almost saying like to shape change, shape the self. Yeah, yeah. I think to me, this piece around like the self creates its own reason for being makes a lot of sense to me as well. I think, especially I think like related to what Mama Pambana spoke to, this idea that there is no one like right way, there is no one like singular purpose, like everybody sort of puts together their own idea of like this is what matters, this is what's important, this is how things work. Um, and I think that like when you tie that idea to the second part, it's almost like you know, maybe it's like more about like I think there's definitely a part of it that's like Kepra's philosophy is like community empowerment through self-mastery. I think that definitely relates in the sense of like when you develop skills, when you develop your resources and connections, you like increase your ability to change. But I also think there's an aspect of it that's like when you gain more clarity on what your personal interpretation of like purpose is, it gives you like more direction, which I think allows you to affect change more strategically, if that makes sense. Yeah, yeah.
I want to jump in.
Go for it.
Okay. I had to like brew on what I was thinking. So I guess how I would interpret that verse is like it's about perspective and energy. Like it's about, your perspective on what you can and can't control, which I mean, like yeah, just like the external, the environment and stuff like that, like the circumstances and stuff. There's very little that we can control about that. But what we can do is kind of like
look at like have a perspective on it and stuff. And like, and also it's just also it's like if when certain situations happen and stuff like that, like how much energy are you going to put into which uh point and stuff? Like what action are you going to take and like what direction are you going to go to like basically for the outcome that you're trying to do and stuff. So I don't know. I think of that as like kind of like a relationship with like the unknown and the things that we can't necessarily control and stuff, but like we could control our choices. Like we could control the choice to choose the choices with the options that we have and stuff. Um, but it's like, depending on the circumstance and stuff, that might limit the pool of choices we have. But it's like, what direction are we going to go? Like, which of those choices lead up um, to which direction that you want to go to and stuff, like the change that you want to occur in your life and stuff. And like, what's your perspective? Like, what is your overall perspective on a situation, and how do you like use that perspective to take action in the direction you want to go?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Hello?
Yeah.
Okay.
And to further Tara's thought for me, I always appreciated her agency. No matter what the circumstances, she just didn't lay down and die over it. Like, oh, I'll hide in the house and wait till they're gone. Or when it was time to pick up a fight. I mean, like when the baby was picked up by the wild animal. I mean, they didn't just say, "Oh my, look at that." Whatever came up, it was a challenge. And she said, "What's the thing that we can do in this challenge?" It just came through her head because she'd come through so many challenges just to get a hold of the grief she had when that little girl was accidentally, well, when that little girl was murdered by a bullet that just came through the gate of the compound. I think the child was 3 or 4 years old.
Yeah.
She had a lot of grief behind that, but because she had given that child some homeschooling. But when it happened, she just kept moving. She kept thinking about, what should I be doing? What can I do? And when her father died, it wasn't like, oh, now we have no one to protect us. We have no one to bring us food. So looking at the choices, I think the agency is always looking at the choices you have that you can see. And in relationships with other, you are able to increase what the choices can be.
Yeah. What were you
And
going to say, Charles?
I actually wanted to, I'm not sure this is on. Can people hear? I
yeah,
don't
I
think.
can hear you.
Oh, okay, great. So going back to the verse, and then responding to what Tara said and what Ms. Fair just said, and what Ms. Pabana said earlier about community, I wanted to just challenge the conventional knowledge that heard so far in this discussion about the way that the self in achieving self-determination that depends on the choices that the self makes. And I wanted to challenge it by saying, well, let's look at I guess what I would call the frontier between the self and between the ego and the community. And I'm curious because when the verse says the self must create its own reasons for being, why does the reason for being, in other words, the purpose for being, why does that depend uh, entirely, I guess, according to this verse, on the decisions made by the self as opposed to the principles of community, which, I mean, the principle of community is held in very, very high value, both in Kepra and in this book. But I'm interrogating the frontier between the self and community in terms of purpose, in terms of reason for being, and inviting anybody else to comment.
Anybody want to speak to that? I think to me it's like I don't see this statement as like contradictory to the idea of community because I think it's like you choose what community's principles you value, you know? And I think in some ways, like in a lot of ways, in fact, I'd say that choice is like made for you over time, like who you happen to be born around, like sometimes it doesn't feel like you're making a choice, like if you've come up in a certain community for long enough. But one, I feel like, as these people have, if you've been like separated from the community that you originally came up in, if like you've been disconnected from the purpose or reason for being that you were maybe born into, then you kind of have to, you know, find a new tether. But I think it's also about more like just, even if, because I grew up in the Kepler community, and I don't think I've ever really chosen at like my deepest core, although I've explored other communities, I don't think I've ever chosen another community or reason for being, but I think that like when you're confronted with options and you stick with the option that you're on, that's still a choice in a way, so yeah, I think it's really just about I think it really just comes down to like, you know there's always a choice that you make.
I guess one other point I'd make related to this is that these latest chapters are about the necessity of uh, focus on self. It, in times of survival, there's a very clear mandate to focus on your own needs. But then Butler juxtaposes that with the principle of community and that's what we need as a species basically to survive. So I guess I'm pointing out um, the relationship between individual survival and group survival.
Yeah. I like that read of it. I think it definitely like in the especially as these like new people get added to the group, I definitely think that idea of like, because these new people that come into the group definitely come from like I got to look out for myself a little bit more, but we see them kind of like battle that as they try to like be a part of this new whole. Yeah. Trust others. Yeah, exactly. Pass it to you, Bill, and then we'll go to the next
I was
chapter.
gonna say, I think you kind of hit there a little bit when what makes humans work so much is when you can let go of yourself a little bit for the good of the group. And so, but even like, I don't necessarily know if it's hypocritical to be like you gotta focus on yourself though too, because everybody, if they want to be part of the community, has to agree to be part of the community. And if you're not yourself willing to give that up, you're not going to help. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but like you got to work on yourself to have the wherewithal to be able to like, yeah, I got to let go of some of myself to be part of the bigger community to make it all work.
Yeah.
But that is what like makes us as a species so different, is we're able to see we can achieve so much more if we're able to let go of some of our individual self-interest for the good of the group.
Yeah.
That is the distinction between humans and
Yeah. But
Yeah,
okay.
I want to
Go
say
for it.
something about that. I think, as a member of a group, individual self-interest is always served too, but in a couple of ways. One is um, the group challenges you or helps you or supports you and encourages you to hopefully be the best that you can be. So, if you have an interest or a passion or something like that, and then I think I definitely agree with the gentleman. I don't think that you can be in a community where you feel as though you have to subordinate yourself to the group in some degree. I mean, people are, but they're not never, I think, really happy. And I don't think they're really able to achieve or hopefully um, be the best they can be. So to me, when I think about it, it's like, I mean, yes, I'm an individual. I have my own goals and things like that, but the community helps me to achieve those goals, supports me, and in me supporting them, I have, like I think Chin said, more flexibility, more support, more encouragement, and I feel like even maybe more freedom because I know that there are others who are concerned and others who are working for our overall well-being. So to me, I feel like the individual, especially in this point in time, the reason that the people like, and I think I want to talk about like Emery and Tori. Like, she recognized that, hey, I'm out here by myself and I have to be careful and I don't know who to trust, but there is more safety and security in having a community that I can trust and that also I know has my back, who's watching out for me. If they got something to eat, I got something to eat, that kind of thing. So the self-interest and the need to survive is served there, and it's made even greater because they would talk about how they were eating and they hadn't had any really food, and the little food they gave them, they was like this, eating like it was the best food they ever had. So to me, self-interest, if it is separate from community, probably will not survive long. And that self-interest and community
Yeah.
interest have to be uh interdependent. I guess that's what I'll say.
I think that's a really great segue because you mentioned Emery and Tori. I'm going to move on to the next chapter, and I'm actually going to squish chapter 22 and 23 together because they kind of, they're very tightly connected. But chapter 22, they travel past Sacramento, kind of to what Cass was pointed out earlier. There are some grisly stories. They run on a dog with just like running around with a human hand in its mouth. They encounter some, cannibal children. But yeah, I think that kind of like to Cass's point, it's almost like it's this like idea that Octavia Butler really explores through the book, but it's like, it's part of our psychology to desensitize ourselves a little bit, to distance ourselves from some of these disturbing things a little bit, especially if we feel like there's no way for us to act on the feelings that we really have about them, you know? So, so she mentions it's just like we just kept walking, basically, so, because what else can you do? Um, Benkole asks Lauren to leave the group with him and tells her about his sister's land. She is very flattered, but tells him, if I'm coming, my group is coming, And there's a little bit of tension about that, I think. I think Benkole is a little bit resistant to this whole Earthseed idea, but I think by the end of the chapter, he basically decides that Lauren is more important, or like keeping Lauren around him is more important than whatever anxiety he has about this group that she brings along with her. So and then he asks her to marry him, and she says yes. So the relationship continues to develop. And then we move into chapter 23. The group sleeps through another battle. This one is interesting because during the night, while Jill is supposed to be keeping watch, Emery and Tori, a mother and her daughter, sneak into the camp and end up sleeping amongst them. Um, there's definitely a moment at the start where they're like, who is this? What's going on? But when they see like who it is and that they're harmless, they decide, okay, we'll share food with y'all. Emery, the mom, asks if they can come along with them. The group sort of like weighs the pros and cons a little bit, especially because, given what they know about Emery and what she showed so far, they're like, they might steal from us, not because they want to do us any harm necessarily, but because that's the only way that they know to survive. But eventually they do kind of decide that, like, uh, those gifts could be helpful to them as well, if they are able to sort of like manage uh, and correct that behavior over time. Um, they learned that Emery and her daughter Tori are basically runaway debt slaves who had been, entrapped, I guess, on this like agriculture corporation's land. And they ran away after Emery's two sons got taken away. They also meet Grayson and Doe, another group or another parent-child pair. This time, a father and a daughter who come from a similar sort of background. Grayson is a little bit more wary of the group, but he quickly takes a liking to Emery. And Tori and Doe take a liking to each other as well. So their two little pairs kind of become like a little mini group, and they agree as well to travel along with them. So yeah, we've got chapters 22 and 23. We've got some more people joining the group. We've got this actual like, the group finally knows about the land, Bancole's land, and makes the decision to travel there together. And there's also this really interesting moment of like, I'm gonna call it conflict transformation between Jill and the group when they confront her about like, hey, you were supposed to be keeping watch, and even though they ended up being cool people, two people snuck into our camp last night. They could have stolen from us. They could have killed us. And at the start, there's like, Jill is or not Jill. Allie is no, it is Jill. At the start, Jill is like resistant to the accountability, but you know, as Lauren sort of like doesn't let up, but like firmly, but like I would say like firmly, but like gently explains like, I'm not going to punish you for this. You're not in trouble, but we need a commitment from you that this won't happen again because it puts all of us in danger. And through the way that Lauren approaches it, Jill is basically able to be like, you know what? You guys are right. I messed up. It won't happen again. And they move on. So I think there's a lot of really interesting explorations of conflict throughout the book. But this one just really stood out to me. Yeah. What were you going to say, Charlotte?
It kind of loops back to chapter 21, that first verse, the opening verse, because there's a line, like Allie says, so what do you want her to do? Get on her knees and say she's sorry? And it says, I want her to love her own life and yours enough not to be careless. That's what I want. That's what you should want now more than ever,
Yeah.
Jill. And that's when she like has her realization. And it makes me think or makes me wonder if shaping self, like the connection between loving self and shaping self, and you have to love yourself before you can shape yourself to love your community and shape your community and
Later, Charles.
bye. The reciprocation of all of
Yeah.
that. But that was just the pivotal moment was I want her to love her own life and yours enough not to be careless.
Yeah. I think it also kind of like touches on Mama Pambana's point, this idea of like self-interest, and like making it clear, like, I'm not trying to attack you, I'm trying to make you realize that this is about you as well, Um, but yeah, I definitely think that there's an aspect of it where it's like, you gotta care, and you have to care enough to realize when you messed up, and to hold yourself accountable. Yeah. Yeah. Any other reflections on chapters 22 through 23? A lot of trauma, for sure. For sure. Um, Yeah. Yeah.
I think that there is kind of like a layering of conflict, and I was just kind of listening and observing when people were talking, and so like there seems to be like interpersonal conflicts, even from the beginning with Lauren and her father, her and Bankole, and her and her group, and then there's external conflicts, and there's individual conflicts. Like she somehow layers conflicts in a very interesting way. And then like
Mm.
you can stretch that to talk about like there's there's like philosophical conflicts like between Earthseed and like traditional ideologies. Like that juxtaposition is like there throughout the whole book in different ways to kind of look at it and see an angles to kind of go at it. And that also made me think of like some of the conflict as well as kind of like between, what are kind of Western ideologies or philosophies that we have, and in terms of individual or self, and how does that complicate and cause conflict when you're trying to adopt survival strategies that are more communal or collective. And not to say that we don't have elements of those, but that is not necessarily something that is very strongly related with Westernization and with Western countries. It's more of an indigenous type of person thing, communal in Africa and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think on the point of like the conflicts and the way that they layer, I think it's this idea that every conflict contextualizes the other conflicts around it. Like the conflict between like Jill and Lauren or Jill and the group around like keeping watch is contextualized by like Jill and Allie's conflict from their past, that they're still trying to like process and deal with. So, yeah, yeah. Tara, I see you have a hand up.
I do. Yeah, I think what stood out to excuse me, what stood out to me with this conflict transformation, one, it reminded me of a similar situation early in this journey when it was just Lauren, Zara, and Harry, where Harry and Zara did a similar thing, like they were on watch and stuff, and they were like
Hmm.
out, being romantic with each other and stuff. And then Lauren like woke up and heard them and stuff. And she pretty much had like a similar conversation where she was like, guys, like, come on now, like, we're supposed
Yeah.
to keep watch and stuff, like just trying to hold them accountable. And I think it's interesting, um, not only with like those two situations, but just like all these various conflict transformations that's happened and how Lauren has grown and adapted to handling those conflicts and stuff and communicating them and stuff. Because like in this example, like Jill to me seems like very defensive and stuff like that, probably because of like trauma and stuff like that. But then when Lauren kind of like switched in to be like, I want you to care and stuff like that about yourself, like that's when Jill kind of like softened. And Lauren, I feel like is taking in those less, I mean, I think on this whole journey from like when it started, when the community burned down, like what is just like showing how Lauren's leadership skills, communication skills, and adaptability skills and stuff, which I think are from seeds planted from her father's word way back when he was like, hey, like you gotta be careful of how you talk to people when you are giving them the word and stuff like that. And I feel like that she's just been like taking that in and all of these various conflicts up to this point. Um so that's what like stood out to me
Yeah,
and reminded me of.
no doubt. Bill, what were you gonna say?
I don't know. I mean, different subject altogether, I guess. I had two different thoughts, just kind of thinking about the theme of like desensitizing to
Hmm.
like horrors around you and things like that. I mean, I think we would say it's definitely like a defense mechanism for people to do that. And I don't know, sometimes I find myself thinking just about like how much the modern world has contributed to that
Hmm.
and the fact that, evolution the modern world's just outpaced evolution. Like we're not really evolved to this world.
Yeah.
Like readily available food and all the information we get. So it's how do you survive when you know there's a genocide happening on the other side of the world? You just tune it out and say like, well, I can't do anything about it, so I'll just ignore it. And I just wonder how much that is different than 100,000 years ago when we just lived in ignorance. We just
Yeah.
didn't know what was happening on the other side of the planet or the other side of the world.
Yeah.
We were just focused on our community a whole
Like
lot more.
carrying capacity for grief.
Right. And like, did we
almost.
evolve to really care for all those things? And now we're just overloaded because we're seeing all of it and we can't, and we're like cutting off, we're like cutting off our own hand to like survive in our modern world. I don't know. Just something I've thought about before.
Yeah.
And the second thing I was thinking about was the people that escaped from these like corporation communities. I mean, it's basically the fruition of what her father was worried about,
Yep.
right? That these corporations are taking advantage of people. And it made me, it brought back something we talked about a couple sessions ago. I think the idea of like, we were talking about corporations and how they act. And someone had mentioned like, they're people too. And I'm like, it made me really stop and think about that. Like, while corporations are made up of people, they're also like a mask that allows people to do, or generally speaking, people do worse things in this like group mentality, mob mentality, because it's like, well, if it was bad, the corporation would stop me from doing it. And like,
Yeah.
there seems to be actions that people take within a corporation in a corporate sense that they would never do in real life, like in a personal relationship,
Sure.
right? Like, I don't know. And I just keep thinking about like, I don't know, the idea that corporates are people is like, I don't know. It kind of gives them it's like saying, it's like being on the internet, people will say all sorts of stuff when they're behind a keyboard and no one
Yeah.
has to actually face you, like
Sure.
that you wouldn't say in person. I don't know. It just, the idea also of these atrocities happening in large corporations because it's easy to like, hide behind the corporate logo. It's like,
Yeah.
well, it's just my job.
I think another way to look at it is that like having that structure and those resources behind you enables people to indulge in behavior that they just wouldn't have an opportunity to otherwise, like the example that you gave with the internet. Um, it's not that like people wouldn't be racist to me to my face. It's just that they know that there could be consequences for doing so, and they are not brave enough to face those consequences. But with like, the veil of anonymity that changes, it's like later on, Emery talks about like the idea that some people think being a slave driver is a good job. Like there are some people that like, um, clearly would take advantage of the opportunity to, be able to drive another human being if given the opportunity. So, but yeah, I think that there's a few different ways you could look at it. Yeah.
I think even beyond being like the scared like I agree with that, like the
Mhm.
fear of consequences, something, but also like I believe there are people in corporate positions that are making decisions that, we'll take an example of like a health insurance person. Like,
Sure.
I'm going to deny health coverage because it's going to kill a bunch of people.
Yeah.
But if they were confronted that in their life, I'll bet you they'd be like, yeah, I can give you medicine.
Yeah.
I don't know. At least
Maybe
I
so.
choose to believe that in that moment, it's easier for them to disconnect themselves from the decision because they're hiding behind this like corporate facade. It's just our
Yeah.
corporate policy.
Anybody else want to speak on any of those points from chapters 22 and 23? Alrighty, let's move on to chapter 24. Talk about trauma. This is a rough one. Uh Lauren describes this one as a horrible week. Basically, while Tori and Doe, the baby girls, are off using the bathroom and Emery's off watching them, they get attacked. Somebody tries to snatch one of the baby girls. And the group runs in to intervene, but the attacker is not alone. And they end up in a really like a shootout, kind of like with another small group. And I think they realized later on that these people were those pyros just without their paint on. And although they mostly get out unscathed, Lauren gets what Harry later calls a cowboy wound. She gets nicked by a bullet. Jill, unfortunately, does not make it, and she dies getting one of the baby girls to safety. So, Allie definitely spends some hard time mourning that. They also realize from this conflict that Emery and Grayson and their children are all sharers as well. Um, Lauren also sort of like confronts him really at this point about like, are you really with us? Because he wasn't like super involved in the battle. He was prioritizing himself and his girl, which, no one can blame him. But at the same time, Lauren is basically like, look, man, we're in this together. So we need your help out there. And he does sort of come around to that. There is a little bit of tension between them later on. Grayson wants, even though Grayson doesn't know how to shoot, he wants Lauren or Bankole to give him a gun, and they both say no. He gets real pissed about that. But Zara, with the help of his daughter, helped to diffuse the situation a little bit. They hand him like a pomegranate, and that sort of like diverts his attention and anger. And they're basically just able to be like, look, man, you can't just get your way just because you want it. Like we work because we're a group. You know, and he isn't like super receptive to that, but he doesn't fight them anymore, so they're able to move on. And then they reach Benkole's sister's home, and they find it burned to the ground. So that's chapter 24. And since we only got about 20 minutes left, I'll go ahead and do chapter 25, and maybe we can just start closing it out. After they find Benkole's sister's house, Benkole risks his life, basically, Lauren says, basically, to go and like talk to the police and see if they know anything. Harry goes with them to see if he can find a job and also to help Lauren feel a little bit more secure, like he's got some backup down there. The police don't know anything, obviously, and they take his money, and Harry doesn't get a job. So they just kind of come back and they're like, well, hopefully the cops don't come back. They don't. But after that, the conversation is really just about like, do we stay here? What do we do with these human remains that we've got? And people are basically just weighing the knowledge that like this place may not be as safe and secure as they thought, but is it really any less safe or secure than anywhere else that they go? And so eventually they do decide that they're going to stay there. There's water, there's fruit trees, there's plenty of space. Benkole owns the land outright, and everyone decides that even with the risks and the challenges, this is the best hope that any of them have of building whatever it is that they want to build together. So they hold a funeral for all of their dead, and they, prepare to embark on the rest of their journey together. And the book closes off, or the chapter anyway, the book ends here with the parable of the sower, which I will read as soon as I find it. Oop. So the parable of the sower is as follows. A sower went out to sow his seed, and as he sowed, some fell by the wayside, and it was trodden down, and the fowls of the air devoured it, and some fell upon a rock, and as soon as it was sprung up, it withered away because it lacked moisture. And some fell among thorns, and the thorns sprang up with it and choked it. And others fell on good ground and sprang up and bore fruit an hundredfold. And that's the end of the book. So, any thoughts on those last two chapters on, some of these losses and realizations, some of these decisions, or even on that parable of the sower, like how do folks feel like that? Why is this book called Parable of the Sower, knowing that that's what that story is?
Well, I guess I'll start by saying I felt like the I guess the whole conversation about whether to stay or not to me kind of illustrated how, if you've known a way of life and it's really, really hard often to let go of it. And to
Mm,
me, Harry going out to look for work, but in their group, they've had people who have worked for entities and it wasn't good. The experience was bad. And so it's like, there's this hope that there's some place that is better, easier, and that's what we would like. But then,
Yeah.
like they had to look at all the things that they've seen and they've experienced and decide, do we want to put our life in the hands of others, or do we want to choose to shape our life in the way that we want, which is that thing about, shape and sell. And then they decided to do it. So I really thought that that was kind of really interesting. But and then all along they were talking about, but it's gonna be a lot of work. And so it's like, man, we would really like for it to be easy versus have to work, but we're gonna have to work. But the choice is, do we work for ourselves and shape our own future, or do we
Yeah.
put our lives in somebody else's hand or go elsewhere where we don't know what we might find? And so I guess I felt like, and then that the verse at the end, I mean, it just gives me a lot of thought because I feel like, she talks about agency, but this verse talks about somebody who threw seeds out and they fell where they fell. And
Mm.
so I feel like it's kind of devoid of agency in the sense that seeds can't really get up and decide where they go. But in life, you do have people experiencing differences, depending on, and I guess I would say if they treat their life like their seeds, then this may very well be true. Like if they just stay where they are, even though they know it's not right for them and they're suffocating or it's a bad environment and they're too fearful to try something else, then they may very well, be like those who fall on the rocks or were killed by the thorns and those kind of
Yeah.
stuff. But I guess that's kind of how I interpret it. But yes, we're seeds, but unlike plants, we can choose to move to different soil, different environments, associate with different people, and
Yeah.
contribute in ways that help to benefit the group. So I guess that's what I'll share.
We can control where our seeds fall to some extent. Yeah.
I had a thought about that, and that was I saw that as circumstances. People are born in circumstances.
Mm.
Sometimes they're born, on the rocks, which means they've got a really bad, hard circumstance, or, with other people that are caring for them. And then some people are born in great circumstances, no problems, they flourish. So I guess that's kind of how I saw that, that there are certain things we can't control, that we are born in circumstances, and that's can be tough sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. To the point that Mama Pambana made about just like work, I thought there was a really interesting line when Harry's like, "There's no work out here," and Mancoli's like, "Look around you. There's nothing but work out here," you know. And I think it's like, like, yeah, sure, y'all may not be able to go get a job to pay for food, but y'all got plenty of land and time to grow some food, So y'all can't pay nobody to build a house, but you could build a house. So, yeah, yeah.
I really appreciate that Miss
Yes, Sarah,
Butler.
we're on chapter 25. Sorry,
No,
continue.
it's okay. I'm sorry. I appreciate that Miss Butler noted like a community's first responsibility is to protect its children, the ones we have now and the ones we will have. And then they went on to list all of the seeds that she had collected and brought with her along the way, all of the food seeds.
Yeah,
And Lauren says they won't do us any good for a few years, but they're a hell of an investment in the future. So
yeah.
ready to keep reading.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I'll throw in my 2 cents on that parable of the sower piece as well. I think I agree with a lot of the way that Mama Pambana put it. I think that like at the end of the day, I think it's this idea just that like it's about the conditions that you're in. And depending on those conditions, you're going to have a hell of a time trying to grow and, bear fruit. But, understanding that and embracing this idea that as human beings, we have agency, that we can control sometimes what conditions we put ourselves in, or at the very least, you know, be aware enough of our surroundings to just like know what our options are, like we can maneuver ourselves to be in a place that is more or less fruitful, and to Miss Betty's point as well, sometimes there, like maybe there was nothing that could have been done to save Jill, in that moment, like maybe she just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, so maybe there are some things that are out of our control, but at the end of the day, the somebody gonna survive, somebody gonna make it. So
That's what I was thinking about too. I was thinking more, it felt, I don't know, to me it felt kind of bleak, but it was also like, I thought it was more about, or what came to mind was more about like species survival, especially when I
Sure.
started thinking about her original thought was we got to go out to the stars.
Yeah.
And so in my mind, I was thinking about her Earthseed stuff and like, and I haven't read another book, so I don't know if it gets into space exploration or anything like that. But like the thought of humans getting on ships and traveling different planets, and some are going to arrive at a planet and realize they can't live there, and they're just doomed.
Yeah.
And some are going to arrive at other planets, and there's thorns there, and they're doomed. But some of us are going to find new planets and be able to create
Yeah.
giant civilizations again, and humanity, quote unquote, will survive. But I
Yeah.
don't know. Again, the idea of like arriving someplace and realizing you're not going to be able to survive is rough. Even if it's like,
Yeah.
oh well, maybe humanity will still survive. I'm not. I don't know. It still felt bleak to me.
And I think like when you bring it up that way, I think there's also this idea of like, you plant the seeds, like we are throwing out all these different like possibilities of what could be all the time, and so like with that, like by them establishing this first earth seed community, in theory they are like planting all of those seeds that will like spread out across the stars one day and like grow or die or whatever they're going to do. So yeah.
I'll just say
I
you
just
asked.
wanted to say one other quick thing, and that was I felt hopeful that they finally found a home and land, and so they
Yeah.
didn't have to keep traveling. So to me, at the end, it was, even though the house was burned down and it was not good, at least they have land and a home. So I found that to be helpful at the end of the book.
And I was going to say, I had to go look it up. I was like, what is a parable? And it says that it's a story that illustrates a moral principle or attitude. So, in that sense, and because it said parable of the sower, to me, typically I take the to mean one person. So I would say that since Lauren was I guess you call it the main person, the main character in this story, she is the sower. But the moral attitude that she is trying to share or that she's come to is that we have to exercise our agency and that change is always going to occur, and sometimes it's going to be good and sometimes it's going to be bad, but regardless of what the situation is, we have the agency to kind of determine how we respond. And so I guess I would say I think that's why she named it Parable of the Sower. So, but of course, only Octavia Butler could answer that question.
I think that's a good point. I think if you think about Lauren as the sower, also you can think about she's intentionally planting those seeds in good places.
Yeah.
So it's like that her planting the seeds, sowing the seeds is her intent and her actions, and you can almost think about the seeds falling off to the side as like unintended consequences. Sometimes they're bad, but sometimes they're great. And like I don't know, maybe
I talked to Octavia and she said you guys are doing a great book study.
Yeah. To Miss Betty's point, like, yeah, I think there definitely is a hopeful note, but I think it's like it's really interesting because when I was reading it, when I got to this point, I have never so deeply felt that a story was unfinished, And of course, like like there's a sequel, and all that, and
So,
technically, like
so have you read Parable of the Talents?
I haven't yet. But I think like what I think it's more is that like throughout the whole story, we're kind of being conditioned to accept that things just keep happening, you know? And so by the time you get to the end, it's like, okay, I know that this is where this book ends and that there's another book after this, but this is like a real living world, you know? So yeah, I just thought, yeah, that it's a feeling that I haven't gotten from other books that I've read before. And I think that just speaks to how well that idea of like change is
Mom.
instilled to the way that the story is like told and structured.
And
But
later,
yeah,
that's why they call it prophecy, my friend.
yeah, yes, sir, yes, sir. Chris,
I'll let Octavia know.
thank you,
You're more than welcome.
Crystal. I see you came off mute.
Yes. So I kind of like 2 points. Like the end of it kind of just kind of left me with three kind of basic questions. And kind of the first one is kind of will Lauren's community hold together?
Mm,
And kind of piggybacking off of what you talked about, what it really left is some unanswered, unresolved things. And then the next one was how will Earthsea fare in a hostile society? And then what new hardships kind of loom on the horizon? But in terms of the last verse, like I really kind of think that it was like kind of a very good ending to the to the book. And then kind of there is like I spent some time kind of trying to map out how all of those verses lead into the other. But just kind of at the end, like there are some themes there, but just that it sets up, those themes kind of set up the future, the last verse from all those other verses. But kind of at the end, the final verse is kind of a perfect encapsulation kind of the novel's themes, and then it bridges like the past, and then it kind of what's been lost, and then we get to experience the present with them, and that's through the founding of Acorn, and then like we're left with what is the and the future. What is the future, and what will grow from this moment?
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's the establishment of the Acorn community. Yeah, and that like you kind of like spoke to Crystal. It's a very apt name because it's this it's a question. You know, it's like
Mhm.
what will this seed grow into? Yeah, and I haven't read Parable of the Talents, but I know that there are some answers to that. Um, yeah, yeah, yeah. Anything else folks want to add in the last few minutes that we have before we close out our discussion tonight? Yeah. Any just like closing reflections on, now that we've read through it all, now that we've like talked about it in depth in its entirety, any reflections on the experience of the story as a whole?
I
I
guess
guess
Well,
I,
I just like to say, I think it's just
Let's go,
sorry.
Miss
I think it's a
Betty. Then
caution.
yeah.
Okay, I think it's a cautionary tale, and right now we need to take caution. And I
Mm.
appreciate you leading this discussion.
Oh, thank you very much.
and for me, it speaks to human resilience. But again, it's not by chance, that they arrive where they arrive. So again, this thing
Yeah.
about agency and working collectively and cooperatively, but that the human that our ability to adapt to change and be resilient, that is a part of us, but we each choose, whether we're going to be predators or whether we're going to be something else. So in this community, the Acorn community speaks to what we all like to believe is the better part of humanity and the resilience and the good that is within us, I guess I would say. So I take that because I mean, if they had turned out to be really terrible people, I probably wouldn't have finished the book. But
Yeah.
again, to me, that's hopeful and inspiring that even in the worst of times, we can. Hopefully, there are some of us who will maintain our humanity, our care for one another, exercise agency, and try to live purposeful uh, lives of principles and values that serve the greater good. So that's what I'll say I take from it.
Well said. Let's hear from Cass and then let's hear from Tara.
I agree. It is refreshing to, um, have a person or have her plant the seeds in these people, and just to see her work from such a young age and starting this, and putting her beliefs down, and navigating her way through her home beliefs and how she's gonna you know cultivate this this following, and everything, like, it's really inspiring, because I she could have, she could have gave up. She could have, decided, oh, this is not going to work. No one's going to follow me. But instead, she was very steadfast in her mission, and she didn't waver from it. She was very, very much 10 toes down. Like, she took root in her own beliefs, and she didn't let things sway her. And I feel like that was one of the things that I took away from her, is that it was just, yeah, she was very wise about her years, but she also didn't waver from her beliefs. Um, and To have all these people, because she started off by herself, and then for her to find these people and for them to create this community, and create a community that is willing to build together. That's my thing, is that's hard in this day and age, but I feel like back then it was a necessity, or in this story it was a necessity, because um, they didn't really have a lot of money, so they had to build community. Like, I feel like in them getting together, they realized that they were stronger together than they are apart, and that's something that I took away from the book as well. To find community, and not just community, good community. Um, I feel like that's it's rare, and but it's very much needed, because um again, not coming from a lot of maternal wealth, I feel like if you do community, I feel like you don't need a vast amounts of wealth if you have community. You know what I'm saying? So um I feel like this book has taught me, yes, just to, be in community, um root yourself in your beliefs, and also just believe in yourself, because you never know, what will come of the things that you think of, or the things that you want to create.
Yeah. I think it's also like it's almost this idea that like not just that you don't need wealth if you have community, but like community is a form of wealth in itself.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's what
Thank
I
you,
was
Chad.
that we have to redefine what wealth means. That
Yeah.
community is a form of wealth. In fact, it's actually has more, in my view, more value than financial wealth. And that I forget the root meaning of the word wealth. Somebody can look it up, but wealth as a root meaning is not financial in its origin. So we definitely have to change the paradigm. And I agree with you, Cassandra, that this this book Octavia is written really just highlights the concept of wealth and community.
What were you gonna say? What were you gonna add, Tara?
Yeah, I mean, definitely agree with what has been said so far. I guess to add my own little spin onto it, kind of going back earlier, Chin, you had pointed out how Ben Cole and Lauren, and like, well, Lauren and Harry and Zara and stuff, like how they were essentially displaced because of their houses and communities being burned down. And then I just thought about like the role of fire throughout this whole book and stuff. And then
Mm.
when I think about like just the element of fire and stuff, and just how like I guess destructive and chaotic and wild that it can be and stuff. And it's like thinking about like the concept of duality and stuff, if those fires wouldn't have happened, at least in those specific situations and stuff, or even what you call it with like Jill and Allie, like they ended up burning down their house and stuff to like escape. Like it's like, those were some like narrower situation stuff. Like obviously not everybody dealt with the fire and stuff, but like just overall, if those situations would have happened, I mean, just the theme of like fire as a threat in general and stuff, and how it can be so destructive and chaotic. But on the flip side of that, that the role of like fire and that destruction and chaos and stuff is to like essentially burn down the old and build the new and
Yeah,
stuff.
it's a catalyst for change. Yes.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, that's what I was just like thinking about. And I think that it's definitely one of my favorite books as far like just as like a story of like resilience and just like adapting to circumstances and like coming together as a community to like adapt and um just like go through have decision making and day-to-day things and stuff, and it's like how are we going to work together to make sure that we're all good and stuff like that.
That's a really good, man. I hadn't even thought about that idea of like the symbolism of like fire as a catalyst for change. That's a really good read, Tara. And it also makes me think about, that scene near the end, which I think is like very poetic in the context of like the whole book. Because like in one sense, kind of like nothing happens, but in the other sense, it's
Hmm.
kind of like everything that's happened so far because it's this part like I think it's like in chapter 24 I think it's in 24 like right before they reach Bencole's house when they literally walk through this like raging inferno, and there's all this
Hmm.
smoke and this sound but they make it out the other side, and it's almost like that last challenge before they make it to the book that just kind of like sums up like especially when you read it as you just pointed it out, Tara, like fire as representative of change. It's almost like this is their Phoenix must rise from the ashes. It's like this is their community's like rebirth. It's a cleansing. It is the culmination of this journey that they've gone through of like change and transformation. So, yeah, and survival. Yeah, yeah, because they survive.
Yeah.
Yeah. Crystal?
I think for me, kind of just thinking about what everybody else said and what my little take on it was, is like I grew up with a paternal grandfather who gardened and a maternal, and I spent quite a bit of time with them. And as a result, I like to garden. And so she planted seeds. And like one of the lessons that I learned through both of those grandparents, like you can plant seeds, but the future of them will still remain uncertain. Right. So you till the seeds, and some of them will grow and some of them won't, but but the future of it is uncertain, and so like
Mm.
there's a necessity of change there, and then but you also have to have wisdom required to guide that change. And so I think that my little take on it is like she's at the end inviting us to kind of question, just in similar lines to what other people have said, to question not just how we survive, but kind of what kind of world we choose to build in the process. And gardening is a process, and you're choosing to build a world and an ecosystem along with that. You may plant some things by each other that don't work well together, and therefore they're going to have a negative relationship and grow. But if you plant things that are more of companions, then you will see those things grow. So kind of like, what type of world are we building? And then we're choosing
Yeah,
to build in the process of what's going on.
yeah. And who are we choosing to build it with? Yeah, very well said. Very well said. All right. Yeah. I think that's a great place to close it out for tonight. Yeah, thank you all once again. It's been a great few weeks going over, as Tara said, this is one of my favorite books as well. So it's been a real good time. I wish the camera would point at me for this part. Okay, okay, there we go. But yeah, it's been a great time. Yeah, whatever. It's been a great time, going on this journey with all of you, exploring this world, this legendary prophecy or work of fiction or however you want to conceptualize it. And yeah, I look so forward to the next one. And actually, I will say our next book study, which will be starting next month, is going to be on the Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. It's going to be happening alongside some workshops that Scarabus Consulting is going to be hosting around conflict transformation and relationship maintenance. So yeah, if you are, we'll be moving out of the fiction space and more into like the realm of like, how to live in the real world. So, yeah, if anybody's interested in signing up for that and being present for that, just stay tuned. We'll have more information about how you can sign up for those sessions coming up soon in our newsletter, on our social media channels, all of the places you go to get your Kepler news, Alchemy Plus, all of it. So, but yeah, thanks again, everybody, for being a part of our Parable of the Sower book study. Yeah, if you give it up for yourselves, give it up for our tech team, give it up for our guests and facilitators over these discussions. Cherie Renee Thomas, who helped get us started with this discussion and, who's been doing a lot of work to guide our exploration of the Afrofuturist genre. If you want to support the Kepler Institute and all the work that we do and our ability to have conversations like this going into the future, visit donate.kepler.org and leave us a donation. Sign up for our newsletter at newsletter.kepler.org to stay up to date on events. Sign up to Alchemy Plus to like tap in with our community directly. And you can watch all of the previous recordings of this series and all of our other discussion series on Alchemy Plus and on our YouTube channel. Yeah, thanks, y'all. It's been great.
Recorder.
Oh, and shout out to the Indianapolis Recorder. Thank you so much, Em. Can't forget them. Shout out to the Indianapolis Recorder, our content partner, who has helped us launch this Mumbo Jumbo series to begin with, and continues to just be a partner and platform for community-driven storytelling in Indianapolis. So shout out to them as well. Yeah. And now we'll close it out. Thanks, y'all.
You've got a question in the chat.
Oh, what's the question in the chat? I'm sorry. My eyes are bad. I can't see. What is the next book? Okay, yeah. So the next book cast is called The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And it's basically about just some tools that you can use to, have some more fruitful and healthy relationships in your life. So, or anybody's life. But yeah. All right. Night, y'all.